Good day, everyone. Welcome to another session of Canvas Live. Canvas Live sessions are presented by the Canvas community members or Instructure employees to help Canvas users improve and enhance their teaching and learning with Canvas. Today's session, we have Ask Me Anything series, where we ask different employees and at Instructure, and they get to share their insights and experiences with us in the community. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. Today's guest is Jared Stein. He's the VP of Product Strategy here at Instructure for the higher education market. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jared, and he can tell you a little bit about what he does here at Instructure before we turn it over to the community for open Q&A. Jared?
Hey, great. Thank you, V-Ray. And hi, everybody. Welcome to the session. This is my first Ask Me Anything, so this is exciting for me. I think it's a really great idea, and I know the goal is to really open it up so you can ask me anything. A number of questions have already been posted to the community site, so I'll address some of those as I kind of introduce myself and the product strategy team, and then I'll just kind of address some of them toward the end too, and we'll have plenty of time for open Q&A. So if you do have questions that arise during the session, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will get to them as time allows. But I did want to spend maybe 10 minutes, but probably less, talking about product strategy and the role that I've been asked to play here at Instructure. And I wanted to start by telling you a little story. So how many of you guys in the audience have used Canvas for more than 3 years? You kind of go back to the early days of Canvas. I imagine a fair amount of you have. I imagine a fair amount of you are new to it as well. I go back to the very early days. I was working at Utah Valley University when the co-founders of Instructure started going on their product validation tour and hitting universities and colleges and sharing their ideas and asking a lot of questions about what works and doesn't work with technology-enhanced teaching. And at the time, I had a team of instructional designers and faculty development specialists, and I myself taught a couple of fully online courses as an adjunct. And so when Canvas was being built, the co-founder said, hey, you teach online, would you be willing to teach one of your courses for one semester once we get Canvas up and running? And I'm like, yeah, your ideas are cool. They sounds like it's gonna work, and I'll give anything a shot once, right? So I agreed to do so, and I think it was the last week of December, probably 2009 or 2010? Yeah, it must have been 2009. Wow. And they gave me access to the Canvas beta instance, and I was able to bring a fair amount of my online course materials over from the other platform, and some stuff I had to manually rebuild, which was no big deal. When it came to quizzes, though, no way to import quizzes into Canvas at that time. I mean, this was super early days. And so I had the phone number of one of the founders, Brian, and I called him up and I'm like, hey man, is there a way to import quizzes at all? And he's like, oh yeah, we haven't built that yet. We haven't built or released that yet. And I said, oh shoot, because this is a 15-week course, and even though it's project-based, students turn in a project every single week and they kind of build on each other. I did quiz every week as well to kind of build their foundational knowledge. But there's no easy way to get the quizzes imported, and we're talking about question banks and pulling from question banks and kind of doing that whole quizzes right for practice tests thing. So I was super bummed, but having kind of built the rest of the course and having committed, I went ahead and offered the course because I knew there were other assessments, and I just thought, well, we'll see what happens in the end. And I did. I looked at what happened at the end of the semester. I compared the results of the course without quizzes to the courses I had taught previous semesters with quizzes, And you know what I found? There was no difference in the two things that mattered most to me and the students. There was no difference in the students' performance on their weekly projects or on their final project. There was no difference in their sort of fluency in discussion forums. And from the students' perspective, there was no difference in the grades. And so this, kind of took me aback, and it was great. It made me ask, do my quizzes just suck? And I think that was partly the case. Do the quizzes not actually lead to the instructional objectives that I have? Are quizzes themselves not effective? So I had to ask a lot of questions. And if Jason Sparks, our senior director of product management for assessment, is on, I'm not saying quizzes are not important. Quizzes are very, very important and can be terribly effective tools. But this experience taught me a few things, and I want to share those with you because these were kind of a turning point for me in thinking about education technology, which I'd been involved in for over 10 years at that point. Number one is that I need to challenge my assumptions all the time. I assume that something works because that's the way that I do it, and it turns out that that's not always true. That in fact, there's always another way. And so even if I hadn't been able to help my students develop the foundational knowledge that they needed, I probably could have found another way besides just using quizzes. But really the beautiful thing for me was that by seeing that this particular course, and this is just one case, but this particular course could do without what was a pretty consistent part of the course design, I actually ended up having a simpler course. And that simplicity, I think, can change your life. So these are 3 little lessons that I learned early on with Canvas. After quiz question importing occurred, I actually went back to using quizzes, but I used them differently. And my course was still simpler in the end. But it really was a great example of how changing the status quo can make you think about things really differently. And that principle of simplicity is something that we try to take to heart and continually refer to as we design and develop Canvas. I'll let you read this quote. It's hard. Simplicity is hard. Steve Jobs talks about this, right? That simplicity is really hard work. Complexity is easy. But that's what we strive for. And we strive for it for a number of different reasons, which I'll talk about in terms of the product strategy. But first, let me introduce you to the Canvas product leaders. You may have met or interacted with some of these folks before. I hope you have. The newest member of the team is Chris Hunter. He's our Senior Director of Product Management. He is awesome. So be right, you need to get him on an Ask Me Anything session. He's not been here long enough to I think be able to ask him absolutely anything, but very, very soon I think he'll be fully equipped. So let me talk a little bit about what product strategy does. If you think about product design and development, product strategy bookends design and development. And we're the folks that start with the question, why? Are we trying to solve? What does our product exist to do? And so we start with that question, why, and sometimes it's different depending on the context. And we begin to do research, and we begin to prioritize themes from that research. And then we work with product management, and that's where the engineering magic happens, the design, the UX, the development, all of that happens. And the product is tested and goes through QA and is released to you guys in beta so that you can test it further and make sure that we're not crazy in our testing. And sometimes that results in some changes before it goes to production. Once it's in production, product strategy has another role. We need to connect with you guys and start to look at the use cases, start to see how you guys are adopting, or in some cases not adopting, a new tool or feature. And as we see it start to pick up, we need to evangelize the use of that tool. And that's just natural if we believe in it, right? We want to evangelize to other Canvas users. We want to evangelize within the company as well, so that folks can see that this thing that we researched and placed a development bet on is actually impactful. And then we evaluate the results. So that's a basic overview of what product strategy does. I'm going to give you a few more details here so you can see how you guys can participate. But we're an agile development shop, and we operate from themes that turn into a product plan that leads to a roadmap, and that roadmap contains epics, which are really big projects that are broken down into stories which focus on users, and we release those in these 3-week sprints and QA and release and all that good stuff. So that's product strategy's role. We actually don't build stuff in product strategy. We just think about stuff. It's a lot easier than what product dev does. But it's fun. And so when we start with why, this is where we in Structure begin from when it comes to Canvas. The postcard from the future for us is that Canvas makes teaching and learning easier for everyone. And this is maybe not grandiose, but I think this is super important, and this says a lot about what we believe and what we think is important. And kind of going back to that idea of asking questions why, Toyota instituted this idea of the 5 whys, that every time you have an idea, you can ask the question why 5 times, and that's how you get to the really deep meaning. So if we were to take easy, for example, we want Canvas to be easy for everyone. Why? Well, because we think that easy software is more widely adopted. Well, why do we want faculty to adopt Canvas? Well, because faculty who adopt Canvas tends to have more organized courses, and they tend to have more flexible elements of their course design. Well, why do we care about that? Organization, students tell us, helps free up some of their cognitive loads. They can focus on the stuff that really matters. And flexibility helps them move at a better pace for themselves. It's a little more individualized. Well, why do we care about that stuff? Well, ultimately because we want students to learn effectively and efficiently, and we want students to succeed. So that's an example of how we can ask the question why multiple times in order to get to a deeper meaning. And so when you look at this, Canvas makes teaching and learning easier for everyone. And you hear Josh, our CEO, talk about how we're technologists, we're not educators. Well, there certainly are educators on our staff, like myself, but I actually believe that it's important that we focus on our role as technologists, and we don't use hyperbole, and we don't claim that we are the ones transforming education. That's you. That doesn't mean we don't have biases when it comes to teaching and learning. We certainly do. And that's informed by you guys, and it's informed by what we interpret from education research. One of those examples is John Hattie's model of visible learning. We think one of the things that technology is really great at is making the invisible visible, making the invisible parts of teaching and learning visible to both teachers and students. And so when we say Canvas makes teaching and learning easier for everyone, that's on purpose. Teaching and learning, teachers and students. We need to empower both. And I mentioned that we kind of roll from that initial why into some themes. One of those themes right now that we're working on, focusing on, is kind of generally student success, and we would articulate that as again, a postcard from the future. Canvas simplifies the tools faculty need to help all their students succeed. It's very, very similar to Canvas makes teaching and learning easier for everyone on purpose, but this is kind of focusing on the tools faculty need and helping all their students succeed. In terms of developing those themes and identifying the priorities, this is what that research phase really looks like. You guys are engaged in the community, which is awesome, and we take a lot of ideas and a lot of feedback and have a discussion with you guys. And some cool things are happening in the evolution of the community that we think will make that more effective and in some ways less frustrating. One of the questions in the community discussion for this session was about the changes that might be coming to the community. That's actually really a better question for Chris Hunter, who is planning and organizing the evolution of the community. But there's one example that I can point to, which is pretty exciting, and that's the new forum for analytics. So analytics is one of those themes that we are focusing on right now, and we want to organize community involvement in that theme. So we kind of frame the discussion, but then we kind of ask for your help at different phases of the product development life cycle, getting your input, getting your ideas, testing certain ideas. So that's one way that the community forums is evolving, and I think that's really exciting. We also have client to Canvas interactions, one-to-ones, either with your institution leaders or through our customer success managers, or even just through the conversations that we might have, either via the phone or at Canvas events. We have user groups. These are generally self-organized and self-supported, but there's a community colleges user group. There is a business school user group. There's a Research One peers user group. There are a number of user groups that have shared interests, and when they come together and they talk about certain ideas or issues, they can sort of gather their strength together and create a unified message, which we listen to. And so I myself participate in a fair number of those user groups as desired. And then finally, we do a fair amount of research on our own. So I have a small research team, but we kind of try to have this attitude of research throughout the organization so that everybody is able to both look at market trends and what's being written about in education literature and what's happening in the field of technology in general, and user interviews and going on site, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all these different inputs kind of filter through what we call the Canvas way to help us set themes and priorities. In the Canvas way, this just sort of is our core philosophy. You can break it down in a number of different ways. One of the aspects of the Canvas way is that Canvas should be a great experience for everyone. I think the way that Brian and Devlin used to say this was, Canvas should be awesome for everyone. And I bring this up because there's one particular theme or set of capabilities that has come up that is not necessarily broadly applicable to the 80% of Canvas users, but for those faculty and teachers and students to whom it applies, it's very, very important. And this is the capacity to teach really large courses, to teach at scale. So this is one of those things where, hey, well, not every teacher has a really large course, and not every student is in a really large course. But for those who are, this is the time, this is the place where technology should really be able to help them a lot. And we've gotten a fair amount of feedback in the last 9 months or so that there are a number of things in Canvas that are not supportive of teaching at large courses, and in some ways are obstacles to it. So we're spending a fair amount of time on that as well. And this is one of those things that everybody kind of has a different set of needs. So we've tried really hard to focus in on the top 4 or 5 capabilities or sets of capabilities that would help here. And a lot of this overlaps with a question that John, I hope you're in the session, brought up in the community forum, and that he's been really great about instrumenting a dialogue about on the community forums. And that's probably particular to higher ed in the North America, but as I've had conversations, it's relevant beyond. This does overlap with this idea of supporting teaching at scale, and he's concerned about listing. So convenience cross-listing is if a teacher is charged with teaching multiple sections of the same course, and she wants to merge those sections into a single Canvas course so that it's much easier for her to update or share materials, interact with multiple sections at the same time, essentially creating a large course within a single Canvas course space without it being formally on the registrar as a large course. There's a I'm not sure how to say it. Maybe perhaps it's a bureaucratic issue there. Perhaps it's certainly a potential legal issue there, because there's FERPA law that protects students' privacy in the United States, and that basically says if a student opts out of being listed in a public directory, then their name shouldn't be visible, for example, to students in other courses in which they are not enrolled. And so when you merge two course sections in Canvas, that creates the potential for that student's name to be visible to students in other sections. And as we've kind of had conversations on the community about this, we've identified a couple of ways that we could support teachers in cross-listing these courses, these convenience cross-listing, as John calls it, without sacrificing that FERPA protection or putting that FERPA protection at risk. And one of those, which we have in the queue right now, is to make it possible for SIS user enrollments to indicate that students in a section should not be able to see students in another section. So that's kind of the next baby step there. John wanted to know specifically about when that would come in the UI, and the short answer is I don't know. So we know there are 3 baby steps that we have to take that will cover a lot of institutions' needs, but when will we have a sort of bulk UI capability for that? I don't know. I can say that it is very likely, but I had a call with Penn State last week about this very topic, and I think we agreed that the baby steps that are currently planned are the right ones, but we actually need to pause and think broadly about what this issue actually means and what the absolute best solution is for it before we jump to the next step, which would be the bulk UI. And I can talk about that more in detail, why it's more complicated than that. And the answer might end up being, yeah, it's a bulk UI change, but we want to. There's some indication that might just be a Band-Aid solution, where the real solution could actually be simpler or more elegant and just as effective or even more effective. So, John, I hope that answers your question for now. I will be happy to come into the community discussion and talk a little bit more about this idea that let's pause and think about what the best solution will be. And Penn State has offered to help organize a working session with some of their peer institutions to help figure this out. I think it would be wise if we did that with other participants in the community as well. So we can talk about that some more. Sorry, I'm talking longer than I expected. I hope it's interesting, but I am answering some of the questions along the way. I'm almost done though. So when we think about taking the the themes and the priorities, we turn those into a product plan, and then that product plan leads into the roadmap. And when we talk about a roadmap, it might be different than what others mean when they say roadmap. When we talk about the roadmap, as you may have experienced, we talk about the things that we are really, really sure that we're going to do. The product plan is often hidden from you folks, and that's where we have collected the ideas that we need to further research and work with the community to test and validate before we put them on the roadmap. But the roadmap itself, the one that we're comfortable sharing and talking about, is pretty short term, and that's on purpose. And even then, we leave gaps. So if you think of this rocks in a jar analogy, the rocks are the big projects that we plan for the roadmap, capacity, the development capacity that we have. And then there's room for water or for sand to be poured into the jar as well. And oftentimes that sand is in the form of minor fixes that might come up from the community, things that have been exposed in a beta release or even a production release that don't quite work right. Little things that we can add to the roadmap without offsetting the bigger plans that we have. So I think that's it. I think it's open question time. I do have a few other questions that I can address from the community forum. So let me try to hit those one at a time. Laura Gibbs, I hope you are in the session. I'm so glad that you asked this question. There's not a short answer to it, but Laura asked if there were plans for Canvas to develop capabilities that support, what's known as connected learning, that essentially support communities, probably self-organized communities, or what's the word? I'm thinking accidental interactions between students that turn out to be beneficial for learning, either within a course space or beyond the course within the institution. And she made some suggestions in terms of how that might happen, how user profiles is kind of a wasted opportunity for that. And I think she's right. I've thought about this for a long time, and I think she's right. I think when you look at for students to help other students, especially in higher ed, I think there's a great opportunity here to facilitate those connections and to facilitate peer supported learning. One of the things that I believe in strongly, and I think a lot of you guys believe in as well, is that our role as educators is to help students become self-directed lifelong learners. And that doesn't mean, that we flip the light switch, so to speak, and one day you're in a teacher-directed classroom and the next day you're on your own. It means that the designers and the instructors are responsible for scaffolding and creating opportunities for students to begin to become self-directed. And so, so Laura, that's my long way of saying that, yes, I believe in this idea. I think planning it and putting it into execution deserves some serious consideration. One of the things that we've believed about Canvas is that it shouldn't be everything to everybody. And in fact, when we can leverage real world technology, best of breed technology from the open web, and the more mainstream, the greater longevity it has, the better. For example, we've always pushed back against the request to create quote unquote blogs in Canvas, and that's because a blog in an LMS is not actually a blog, in my opinion. I'm going to stop sharing this screen here so we can kind of see each other. Oh, I don't know if that's going to work. Yeesh. There we go. So, we want to be cautious to not try to recreate things in the LMS that are not appropriate for the LMS or that are already done better outside of the LMS. If we were to discover that there were great tools to facilitate this kind of thing that we could seamlessly integrate into the LMS, we would want to do that. If there is the ability for us to do it in such a way that it gives instructors some flexibility in choosing the tools, or even flexibility for the students, we would want to do that. If, though, we were to discover that the best way to help teachers get started with this idea is to have something that's more seamless, more built in, we would look at that as well. So, Laura, in the community, I said, I think this deserves a longer discussion. I would love to have that discussion with you. Anybody else who's interested, maybe we can just have a working session and just kind of talk about it, think about it. And also think about it from an interdisciplinary perspective or cross-disciplinary perspective. Laura, I know you teach in the humanities. I've taught in the humanities. I've also taught in vocational sciences, and I've worked with a lot of instructors across disciplines. I think we would want to think about how this would apply to them, or if they would think that we were wasting our time by investing in it. How would we go about testing that? How would we go about evangelizing that? I think all of those are important considerations from, at least from my perspective, in the product strategy seat. Okay, cool. So I've got some more questions. I'm gonna keep going, and I'm hoping more questions are queuing up here. Elizabeth asks about admin permissions, admin capabilities and admin permissions. Yes, Elizabeth, admin permissions are in fact on our roadmap. Now, I don't know the specifics of what we are aiming to target with enhancements to admin permissioning. I know from conversations that one of the potential pain points is in the granularity of Canvas role permissionings, that the granularity is sometimes insufficient for administrators' needs. So permissioning enhancements of some kind is on the roadmap. I think I will need to get some more detail from you in terms of what specifically, but we can probably do that offline, and that's a little bit further down the line. It's midterm, not short-term roadmap, but it is coming, and let's connect to see if what you need is currently being considered for that. Other admin capabilities, we kind of add those incrementally all the time. I think we do tend to favor teacher and student capabilities over admin capabilities because that's the bulk of our users. But yes, we listen to the admins. It's our first point of contact for institutions, and so your advocacy through your customer success managers is heard. We meet with them very regularly and prioritize the issues that come up across institutions, and those make it into the roadmap either as the water or sand in the jar, or sometimes as big rocks. Kristen, oh wait, Kristen asked me some questions about myself. I think I answered some of those. I'll be happy to answer more, but I'm gonna leapfrog Kristen for a moment to answer Chris's question about data. So Chris asked if we had any plans for a more usable form of Canvas data, a form of Canvas data that doesn't require that you be a data expert or a data scientist to use. And the answer is yes, but it's not on the roadmap yet. We have that idea in our product plan, and we're actually doing research on that right now. In fact, I had a meeting on Monday about this topic. So yes, something is on the plan. Let me kind of explain this to everybody else who's on the call. When we think about data, we think about it as a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum is data that has been interpreted or transformed so that it is very meaningful and easy to understand for day-to-day teachers and students. And that's super important. And that's where analytics comes in, and that's where our new analytics work will offer some big improvements. On the other end of the spectrum is data that is raw, right? That is very, very complete, but also by nature very, very complex. And Canvas data is kind of a step toward the other end of the spectrum. Canvas data takes all of the critical data from the raw data and optimizes it so that data scientists, data analysts can take that optimized version of the data and more quickly bring it into a BI tool like Tableau or whatever. But that's still sort of a far cry from, that's still a lot of data. And for a lot of folks who are comfortable with Excel but not comfortable with Tableau, right? Who are able to maybe do do some basic visualizations, but not able to write a query for a database, needs something in between. And we do have some canned reports, but we also have heard and recognize the need for customizable reports, reports that can be filtered or can include certain variables and not other variables. So definitely something that that is in the product plan, not on the product roadmap yet. We need to do some more research on that, and we would love to talk to you, Chris, about what your particular needs are. And I have one more question from the community. I'm going to toggle back to it to see if there are any others. From George about using Canvas data and the CLI tool. And yeah, I mean, I've worked with Canvas data, but George, I can't answer that question. Sorry. But, oh man, and then there's a bunch more questions coming in. Hey, I'm just gonna pause for a moment. B-Ray, am I doing this right? Should I just go to the community now and look at some of these questions?
Yeah, if you refresh the page, some new questions have come in. If you can continue addressing those. I know some of these folks are already in the chat as well, so.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So yeah, I'll toggle back and forth between these. And you know what? Yeah, no, I'll just keep the camera up. That's cool. You guys don't need to see the questions. I'll repeat them. So from the community thread, Monish, I hope I'm saying that right. That's a cool name. Monish asks, how can I efficiently pull out the user roles from user's API? Yeah, I can't answer that one. I know how to use the API, but I'm not the technical expert there. So I think let's ask that one in the general community where either some of the other product folks or some community members can help you out there, because that's one I can't deal with right now. Too technical for me. I'm not smart enough. Oh, Stephen. We saw a lot of great enhancements to Canvas presented at InstructureCon 2016. Thank you. Particularly around gradebook and quiz engines. Okay, so those are the things we're talking about for the future. Haven't heard much. What's the current timeline? Awesome. Great question. Yes, so quizzes.next or quizzes2, however you want to refer to it, is still being developed. And we are putting a ton of resources into that to make sure that we do it right. And so that's still in development. It is still on target. There are institutions and individuals who are doing the, I don't know if we call it the alpha or the early beta of that, and making sure that we're doing it right. The current timeline for that, I believe the full parity release of the next quizzes engine is before InstructureCon. Yay. And that's both full parity and a bunch of the other cool, awesome stuff that Jason Sparks showed, gave you a preview of at InstructureCon 2016. So that's a really good example of a really, really big rock in the jar. And it's a big rock because it's a fairly complex system in the first case. And we want to do it right. We want to make it as simple as possible. We want to really leapfrog what's been done in quizzing engines. And that's in part because teachers who currently rely upon quizzes, it's their bread and butter. But I actually believe that there are applications for the fundamental thing as an active learning practice that are, not considered by other teachers because of the sort of stigma around either quizzing in general or quiz tools. So I'm optimistic that we're going to build this and present this in such a way that even if you've not ever used an online quiz before, you'll look at it and you'll be like, oh, okay, I see that. That could be cool. And then as far as gradebooks go, yes. So Christy Ruck, I don't know if she's been on Ask Me Anything recently, but she has additional team resources to make the gradebook enhancements happen. We're going to see some of those happening in the short term before InstructureCon. One thing to know about those, anytime we do a major set of enhancements to a tool like gradebook or quizzes, there's the risk that we face is that we're going to present users with a dramatically new part of their workflow that disrupts what they're doing within a semester. And so with the gradebook stuff especially, we're very carefully timing that and prioritizing some of the enhancements so that we can kind of rip the Band-Aid off for the more significant workflow changes. And they will be improvements, don't get me wrong, but they will be some workflow changes in between terms in the summer, and then some of the other enhancements will follow directly after. So Christy can give some more detail on what specifically is scheduled in the short term, but there is both a short term and a midterm project for gradebook enhancements. And as far as making these updates available to customers, if you mean updates on the timeline, I will get with Christy and Chris Hunter and make sure that the Product Studio page, or I'm sorry, I think it's still called Product Studio, is up to date with any information that we are currently able to share. Okay, and then Lisa has a question. This is our first year using Canvas, grades 6 through 12. Awesome. Thanks for joining the Canvas family, Lisa. So the closest to the ultimate goal of having grades import into our SIS Infinite Campus. Teachers ask me about this on a weekly basis. What response do you recommend that I give them? I think I'll have to, we'll have to get back to you on that one, Lisa, because I don't have the timeline on that specific integration, Infinite Campus. Especially in the K-12 world, the two-way integration with an SIS varies from SIS to SIS. And I mean, if you had asked me, hey, do you have integration with two-way integration with Infinite Campus? My initial response would have been, oh yeah, but the way that you're asking this now means that either I'm wrong and we don't, or that your school administrators don't know how to set it up. So rather than me giving a false answer, Lisa, let's get you in contact with the product manager. So I will make a note to put you in contact with, or at least to send a request to the product manager on this particular topic. Ooh, Dale, interested in learning more about Skype for Business and Campus. Office 365 School, yeah, it works okay, but Skype gives us some other options that we want to have Skype for Business and Campus. We did a lot of work with Microsoft last year on a better Office 365 integration, and we made some really big strides. The initial plan was to include Skype in that. We decided against that. It was a sort of a mutual decision to not do that. I believe there were some major technical obstacles that made it not feasible in 2016. Dale, so Dale, I don't have a really good answer for you. Let's see if there is a community forum or a feature idea on Skype that we can take a look at. And if that's either closed or doesn't give you the answers that you need, I'd be happy to poke into that a little bit with Melissa, our VP of Partners and Platforms, and find out what the story is behind Skype for Business and Campus.
We have a question from the community chat from John Thompson. He asks, regarding evangelizing new features, in my experience, great features are little used because instructors don't see how they fit into their teaching. Do you have any thoughts on promoting features that research shows improve outcomes?
Yeah. So good question. I think we have to do this together. I think we do this. We do this from time to time. And B-Ray, maybe you can comment on this. But when we do have a significant new feature, especially shortly after launch, we will organize a session much like this, whereby we'll have some product expert or a product engagement expert talk about the feature and its application. I think we could do more of those, and I think we could do, we could even have a schedule of those, whereby we rotate through some that may be underused because we talked about them a year ago when they were launched, and now it's been, it's a year later and there's something new to talk about. So I think we could do a better job of talking about some of these new features in terms of their application and the impact and the basis behind them. Bira, do you have any ideas or comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and we will continue to revisit the community and leverage their experiences to bring those types of stories and best practices to light in sessions like Canvas Live.
Yeah, right. Well, give me an example of a recent one, because I know we have done those. I know we did one not too long ago on Mastery Paths and on the parent app and on the Google integration, the new Google integration.
Yes, those are the ones that we're working on now, but definitely as more need arises, we continuously try to revisit features in new ways and best practices.
Yeah, I was thinking about this just recently as I've been having conversations around outcomes. So, outcomes has a ton of potential. It's the Canvas outcome system is not used broadly. Even by institutions who know they want to do outcomes. They may not know about it, they may not know how it works, or they may have hit a single obstacle and given up. So I think outcomes is a great example that has come up recently that we could revisit in a Canvas Live session. But I think, yeah, if we could have a schedule of those, which really are focused less on the functionality and more on the application, then as I said, I think this is something we could do in partnership, whereby if we can make, we can make those available, then you guys can figure out at your schools, at your institutions, how you can then facilitate working sessions or workshops or viewing parties. Everybody likes a party around those.
We have a question coming in from Carl Forrest. We wonder about the strength of the discussion forums and discussion around the community, that discussions be enhanced. Mm-hmm. So this is to discussions in Canvas. Yeah,
I agree. And I think this connects really strongly with Laura Gibbs' question around facilitating community within the course. So discussions and other interaction tools, yes, we're going to start researching that seriously this year in terms of what should that look like in the year 2017, 2018, the second decade of the 21st century. So that's about all I can say about it right now, is that it is on my research list, and it is pretty high on my research list. But it would be an undertaking similar to quizzes, not quite as big because it's not quite as complicated, but we would think about it in the way that we said, quizzes.next. This requires that we take a clean slate, why, and ask the big questions and look at what the real problems are, so that we can have a longer term solution that is super elegant and still addresses all of the needs that we've heard so far. So nothing on the short-term roadmap, but definitely on my research list.
Great, thank you. One more question from John Johnston. Can you talk about how you'd like to see Mastery Path's functionality evolve?
Great question. Two things I want to see happen in Mastery Paths. Number one, Mastery Paths based upon outcomes performance. So right now it can be based upon assignments or quizzes, etc. But it should be directing based on outcomes performance as well. And we're doing a fair amount of foundational work right now on outcomes that will help us do that. So it's one of those first things first situations. But that's number one. And I think that's so important, not just because it's a way of making outcomes more applicable and making the utility more apparent to more instructors, but because when you think about the idea of offering students alternatives to the key assignments, then you don't want to worry about points and calculation and how does it add up to the total, and do some students get an advantage if they actually take an alternate path than others. Mastery is the way to go, focusing on whether or not you have performed acceptably on these outcomes. That's the way to go. The other part of Mastery Paths that I want to see us do is modules, right? So right now, Mastery Paths can happen within a module. I want Mastery Paths to happen between modules, so that a certain choice by a student or certain direction by the instructor would send students down different module paths. I'm gonna answer a couple of Kristen's questions because she's awesome, and she let me talk about her OER use case last summer. She asked what inspired me to work in the field of education, what motivates me, what would I like to see educators emphasize in their classroom practices. I don't know that my opinions here are special. I talked a little bit in the sort of preamble about how I believe in student-centered learning, not in the sense of just students run wild, but in the sense that teachers are deliberately and instrumental in scaffolding students so that they can progress toward becoming self-directed learners. And I think just having that mindset would change a lot for the better in the classroom, because it's not saying that you have to radically change the way that you teach. It's saying, no, you need to think about the end goal of education, and what you're doing in the classroom is going to help your students in the long term if you design it right. So that's kind of the last answer for you. It's really just keeping in mind that the objectives that we have for our students in our class are really just stepping stones for their long-term development. And ultimately, our goal as educators should be to make them self-directed, lifelong learners. What inspired me to work in the field of education? Gosh, somebody asked me this a couple months ago, and I think my answer was superficial. And when I saw this last night, Kristen, I remembered something. And I'll tell you this really quickly. We got a few minutes, and if there's other questions, I'll stick around and answer those. But when I was in first grade, and I didn't realize this till I sort of pushed myself to think further back. When I was in first grade, and that was a long time ago, so I don't remember all the details. I remember sitting in the front row, kind of in the corner, and I didn't know any kids, and for whatever reason, and this was like first week of first grade or something, for whatever reason, and some sort of pre-assessment, a math pre-assessment, and it was probably just addition, subtraction, but it was a math pre-assessment, and for whatever reason, like, it was super easy for me. I think I loved math as a kid. That changed in middle school, but I loved it when I was a little kid. And so, like in a few minutes, I'd gone through this math pre-assessment worksheet, and the boy sitting next to me was crying, and he hadn't done a single question, and he just didn't know how to do math, and I don't remember what the instructions were. I sort of viewed it as, hey, let's see how much you know. And for this poor boy, just kind of having that test in his face right away ruined his day. So, what's a 5-year-old to do? I think, or a 4-year-old to do. I helped him. I taught him how to add a few problems together, and he was starting to learn. And we didn't get further than 3 questions. Then what happened? The teacher came over and said, "You cannot help him cheat." Teacher's in charge, right? So, and I'm 4 years old, so what am I going to say? So that was one of my first lessons about how education works. And it's not one of those things that I dwelt on or came back to or thought much about. But in retrospect, that was my first indication that, there's probably a better way for education to happen. That's all. Any other questions?
There's one last question, and this one I think it would be a great way to round out the session. Sylvia in the forums asks if you could give us an overview of the main educational institutions, how they're using Canvas kind of internationally. Are their uses and needs about the same, or I think she was just curious of what's going on outside the US.
Yeah, and we are expanding internationally, Sylvia. So it's really educational for us. We're learning a lot, and so for those of you who don't know, Canvas has a strong and growing presence in the United Kingdom, and in Scandinavia, and in South America, and in Australia and New Zealand, and in Hong Kong, and it's so exciting. But we have to be humble, and we have to learn every time we enter a new region. So an overview of the main educational institutions that are using Canvas. It's kind of tough to answer that briefly, but let me talk a little bit about the United Kingdom from a higher ed perspective. United Kingdom is currently undergoing some reforms or proposed reforms that are encouraging higher ed institutions to do a better job with the student experience and student outcomes, and they're instituting some new processes to ensure that that's in place. And so when they're using Canvas, they are really looking at it as, this is a way that we can help our instructors be more organized and give students a better student experience, help them participate in their classes on their mobile devices the ways that they want to engage with their learning materials for flexibility, but also for organization. So it's sort of a very similar story, but they are so keenly focused on how do we improve the student experience, and how can technology help us there. Australia and New Zealand, they have, I think their uses are relatively similar. I feel like Australia is really a leader in the world in K-12 digital teaching. Higher ed as well, but certainly in K-12, teaching with technology in K-12 in Australia seems to be established. It's not something that is up for question at all. It's just what they do and what they've been doing for a long time. So that's awesome. South America, it's hard to sort of say, hey, South America in general, but one trend or maybe common theme that I've seen there is that because there are sometimes limited resources to both hire qualified teachers and sort of provide them with some of the academic freedoms that we enjoy in the United States. They often are interested in facilitating top-down deployment of content and curriculum, and even the ability to manage and maintain the instructional design of courses for instructors who aren't necessarily fully trained teachers and able to design and develop those courses on their own. So that the teachers are perhaps in a bit of a more facilitating role. So, to your second question there, Sylvia, are their uses and needs about the same? There's a lot that is the same. And there are some things that are different, but they're different by degree, by and large. Whereas top-down deployment and management of curriculum might be super important in South America, it's important in pockets in the United States. It's important in pockets of Europe. So it's not that it's just a South America thing, it's that the prioritization or the rank ordering might be different. That's just my perception, and it's limited, but that's it.
Thank you so much, Jared. We want to be respectful of your time, so we really appreciate you being here and sharing your experiences. Just wanted to wrap up the session and let everyone know thank you for coming to our Canvas Live session. We hope you join us in the future session. And if you have any additional questions for Jared, feel free to post them on that event page. And we hope to get back to you as soon as we can. And we'll post the recording of this session online as well. Thank you so much. And we will.
Thanks, everybody. That was fun.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks, Jared.
Bye.